Members, the meeting will be recorded and would ask members to know that all mobile phones must be switched off as they interfere with the recording. So I will do that. Done. Can I also remind members where appropriate to declare any interest as we proceed through the meeting? Apologies. I have no apologies recorded. Just before we move into Chair's business, I see some coming into the public gallery. So can I welcome two students who are with Robin on work experience from Wellington College, Daniel and Christopher. I remembered. You're very welcome. Thank you very much. And also Ben Taggart, who's with myself, and he's a student at Coleraine Inst. So you're all very welcome to a public gallery, and we trust you find this informative rather than amusing. So we'll try and proceed with the business. The Chair's business, there are a couple of things that I want to raise. The Common Funding Formula Scheme, the Minister indicated during topical questions yesterday that the Department is ready to brief the Committee on the Common Funding Scheme next week. So I propose that we amend our agenda for next week to include the briefing so that we can facilitate this. And would also suggest that we would start the meeting next week at 9:30. Okay. Obviously, the issue of vacancy control in regards to the ELBs has been raised, as the Minister advised the House yesterday, that he is now to review the policy of vacancy control in the education and library boards. So I propose that we write to the Department seeking details as to how this work is to be carried out and how the Minister is to reconstitute, if that was the case, the education and library boards, in the light of there is still one board that currently is still being governed by commissioners. It also might be useful if we would ask the Minister to give us an update in terms of where he believes the current process is in regards to ESA. Agreed?
You can an oral briefing possibly in closed session on it.
Yes, and possibly even have a closed session oral briefing with the Minister if that was possible. Okay, thank you. Guidance to schools and post-primary transfer. There was some reference made last weekend to guidance issued to parents in respect of the unregulated tests. The clerk has been in contact with the Department, and in tabled items today you can see what is believed to be the guidance at the centre of the issue. The Committee noted the guidance back in June 2013 and indicates that this is not new, and that where a parent believes that the revised curriculum is not being followed by a school, they can raise their concern in the first instance to the Principal, and then to the Board of Governors, and then to the Curriculum Complaints Tribunal. These tribunals are to be set up by the ELBs on an ad hoc basis, but are independent of the boards. So are members content that we note the clarification that we have received? Danny?
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned by the fact that all the schools are being told that by law they have to have regard, and I wondered whether we should be getting a legal brief to see if this is really the right way, because it's putting all the schools under a threat, which they shouldn't be under, and I think we should get clarity.
We got legal opinion in the previous committee, and I know it's old opinion, but guidance, and it's I think now accepted situation. Guidance is just guidance, but any guidance in terms of a Board of Governors has to pay due regard to guidance. But it is not legally binding. It is guidance.
So we need to make it clear that it's not legally binding.
That has been made clear. Every Board of Governor that currently operates on the basis of how they use any piece of guidance that comes from the Department, they have to ensure, and I think if you had been any discussions with schools, you would know that that's one thing that they have been very clear to do, that they give due regard to the guidance, because that's what they have to do, but they ultimately make the decision as to what they do. So I think that we don't see there being much more happy if the Committee wants to get further legal advice, but the legal advice will come back, I think, as it had been previously given to us. Trevor?
Yeah, I think actually it might not be a bad idea, Chairman, because there was a touch of on the other hand about that guidance, as I remember, and that advice from the legal people, and on the first page it does say the legal status of this guidance, and it refers to Education Order 1997 and 2006, so that they're quoting guidance under statute, And there's a, there's a bit of a contradiction there. If it's just guidance, guidance is either advice or else it's based on legislation. Or, you could play around with words all day, but
That's what we pay the lawyers to do.
I mean, and I can remember having quite a discussion about to have regard for and what that meant. I think that's in the bill, actually. I mean, that was another thing that probably caused 6 months of a hold-up. So might not be a bad idea to just revisit it. I'm sure legal services could take it out again.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And also that would write to the ELBs and see when and if they have used the Curriculum Complaints Tribunal. Just an update from them in regards to it, just to see. Okay. Okay, a couple of other things. There was an event here last evening. It was to mark the Chinese New Year, and I attended as the chair of the committee, and the speakers' event was held in the Great Hall. And I think it was also to launch the photographic exhibition that's currently in the Great Hall. So if anybody hasn't seen the photographs that are there, I think it would be worthwhile. The pupils from Coleraine and Grosvenor that took part, and also the young pupils from connected with the Confucius Institute, I think were outstanding. It was a well worthwhile event to be present at. So. The STEM is School event, and we had raised this. I think the event, certainly in terms of engagement and information, was useful. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay for the roundtable discussions. But I understand from conversations that I've had that it was a useful event. I think there was one concern raised that maybe there was too many speakers and not enough time maybe given to actually how the roundtable discussion took place. So maybe there's something that can be gleaned from that. A summary report of the feedback from the session is being put together by the Northern Ireland Science Park. I think it would also be right and proper that we would write to Joanne Stewart to thank her for the immense work that she did put in to ensure that the event was a success. I think if you look at the quality of the people who were there, it was certainly impressive, and I think it was certainly worthwhile to do. Chris?
No.
Sorry, no, Danny.
So purely in the middle of that, and I wrote down the title, was the most fantastic, uplifting piece of film. Like, was it Gen I or Gen, which would have made anyone go away thinking, wow, Northern Ireland's had it, it's good and it's going somewhere. And I think we should be circulating that to everybody. But I do think we need to revisit the whole thing and get a longer discussion, because it was a good event. Just lacked time.
Okay. Sean?
Just a similar point, and I think it justifies our position in terms of the emphasis we are placing on STEM, because you can see, if we are to get our economy right, okay, STEM's not for everybody. There has to be really joined up thinking between Department of Education, DEL and DEDI in particular. And a very, very good event, maybe too much crammed into it. I think one of the highlights was it Miss Lindsay from School in Derry? Yeah. Such an enthusiasm, such a drive in STEM in that school. And it would be nice to see some of that disseminated out around.
Yep. I think it's important when we get the summary of the report and the feedback, it's what we do with it. And there's a collaborative responsibility on ourselves and the other committees that took part to come to an agreed position as to how we actually, as committees, could actually get tangible benefit out of the event. And I think the BT Young Scientist, the Sentinel's input, all the various things that goes on, I think collectively all play a part in us raising the agenda in terms of STEM. Maeve, and then Jonathan.
Thank you. And I think it was a useful event as well, and there's no doubt that there's learning there from people like Mary Lindsay, who often was on the field on her own in relation to driving that agenda. But one of the clear messages, in my opinion, was the disparity in uptake, both north and south, among schools, particularly at the major kind of key pieces. And the statistics were given that I think it was over 50% of schools in the 26 counties engage, and the whole process around STEM, where it was 13% here. So there's a real challenge and learning from what is going on the rest of the island, and that I think we should be returning to, because that was a very clear, stark disparity in my view.
I think you see it too whenever, albeit I know we're not comparing like with like, in terms of numbers and so on, but in terms of the overall approach, when you go to the BT Young Scientist, and you know the point that I made at the event and I've made since some of us were at the BT Young Scientist, the stark reality that there was no school from Northern Ireland in the primary. You know, I think that was a hugely missed opportunity. Now, not surprisingly, since we raised the issue, ETI has come out of the woodwork and has decided they're now going to have a review of the world around us, because the world around us was being used as where it was all hid, and you know, but it's just a cover, and I think, and we need to support teachers, because I think there are teachers too who probably genuinely do struggle with how they implement the STEM subjects in a primary school, and you know, we need to see how is it being driven in terms of the support that they have, the training that they have, and all of that. So obviously we can't do anything with the department. As a personal view, and I'm being led by committee on this, but when the report comes back of the event, then the first place I think we have to do is send that report to the department and ask them for their assessment as to how they believe this can be progressed. Jonathan and then Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I have to declare an interest here because I've been teamed with a geoscientist, and one of the things we're actually looking at, and I've been in contact with Peter about this, is how we improve STEM in primary schools. I know, why me?
So does this mean you could be our first astronaut to the moon? No?
One way.
No, buried 50,000 feet under the ground, maybe.
Oh, is that all right? I was going the wrong way.
You're going the wrong way.
It's not the first time a lot of people will say, but anyway.
About fracking.
Somebody said in the chamber yesterday, that's the F word. No, I was at the event and I found it fascinating, but fascinating and depressing, because did you not listen? Every industrialist who spoke at that event said the exact same thing. They can't get staff. They can't get engineers. They can't get IT people. They can't. Now, I find that remarkable because, you know, we'll have to be fundamentally honest about this. 30, 35 years ago, when I was leaving the education system in Northern Ireland, the one thing you had abundance of was engineers and scientists who were willing to go into those industries. So what has fundamentally changed in that 35-year period? Well, I think what has fundamentally changed, and we're all starting to pick up on it now, is those careers have been devalued, and devalued, unfortunately, by the educationalists in our system. They just don't see any value in going into those careers. One of the discussions we're having is the lack of capacity amongst teaching staff to actually teach careers to children, and especially in the primary sector, because, you know, we can talk about teaching science, but if you can't relate that to the real world and what a child can actually eventually become in that real world around it, it has no meaning to them. And the difficulty we're starting to see now is that, you know, there's a very simple career path for a teacher. It's school, university, in a college, out and teach.
No business.
No business whatsoever, and no concept of what goes on out there in a very changed world around a lot of the STEM issues. You know, because it's no longer the heavy industries, Chair, that we had 35 years ago. It's fundamentally changed, and there's some incredible careers out there, but unfortunately there's no understanding of what they are and how you actually get to them. So there's a massive issue in there that needs tackled.
I think it's related to, and I don't want to get into the whole discussion, but there's the issue about the entitlement framework was supposedly to address that issue in terms of giving breadth of opportunity, but it hasn't, it would seem, been successful in terms of actually encouraging that diversity. If you set out a menu that says 24, 27 subjects you should be able to choose from, surely the rationale of that is as well that you're encouraging then young people to take up particular pathways. And you would think that it should, I think it's what, it all goes back to what the OECD report in a strange way said. The policies seem to be generally right, but it's how they then actually put in practice. I think that's where the difficulty. I think we generally, if we all were saying what we want for our system, we would go to this room generally agreed. But it's then how it's actually put into practice, and I think that's where we're having difficulties around
It's
that.
how it's put into practice, Chair, and we all need to be honest here because as Chair of Board of Governors, I see this. See when it comes to STEM subjects, one primary school will teach them well, another will teach them poorly, another won't even teach them at all. So there's no consistency in the system there.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I just support much of what Jonathan has said. If you look at the reports even recently, what's driving or whatever economic recovery we are having is companies who make things and design things and innovate, and that's exactly what we're relying on at the minute. It isn't the more traditional arts and humanities that's driving any sort of economic recovery. But it's just on a general point, maybe Danny and Sean spoke about it before, is how do we get our message out? I'm not sure what type of budget the committee has or anything else, but I know it was touted before perhaps of engaging in social media and ways in which this committee may get out what we do better to help, because I don't think anything that the department do is going to click awe and inspiration in young people. I think they need to see it in various places. So I know again that video was very inspiring, we've seen the other day, but again as a committee, how do we get that out there? From what I see, we can't unless one of us personally tweet something or share it on social media. I don't know if this committee needs to look at how do we publicise what we do. What's we all I think anyway share similar feelings around STEM. How do we get that out there to the young people? I don't think we do it so far. So is there a different way we could do that? And it's around how we sell ourselves too, because I think again it's a wider problem for the Assembly in that most people don't have a clue what any of these committees actually do. So if there was something we could find a way, be it social media or something else, I'm not sure, publicise what we do. That sort of event the other day, to really put out a video or something to say this is what we had, this is the subject that we think is important. I think it's just something worth bearing in mind.
Peter, would you be happy to give some consideration to that?
Well, Chair, there was a video that members
liked. Yeah, there is, yeah.
Members liked, I think.
Yeah.
And there was quite a lot of, I'm not going to embarrass myself by pretending to know a lot about Twitter, but there was quite a lot of Twitter feed. We had a report just from Joanne this morning on the Twitter discussions that were generated following the event, and there was something in the Telegraph.
Those who know about Twitter.
Well done. I do monitor, I follow you all, those who use Twitter.
Oh, sad individuals.
But I don't tweet. Right, okay, so there's an action, Clark to go away and come back with some way to...
On the back of that, Chair, do we actually have a social media strategy within the committee? Because I find that, because I know when this was an issue which was brought up on the other board I'm on about the PSNI, they have an incredibly effective social media strategy. In fact, they're now one of the biggest users of Facebook in the whole of the UK, and it's proved incredibly effective. So, there's lessons can be learnt from other areas around all of this, and maybe those who implemented that strategy.
The Assembly certainly does have a social media strategy. It
Well,
might be something for
committee.
Chairperson liaison group.
It may be, and I think it's a valid point to raise, and let's see what we could maybe come back as practical.
Especially if you look at if we're going to Fermanagh, if we're going out to a
Yes.
school, say Finland, whatever it may be, a small, any of us can do it, put together that type of video that shows people exactly the benefit, what it is you're engaging in. I think people will actually connect with it quite well. And one of the big pluses also for it, and we probably all know this from one constituencies, it's actually the traditional media. Click into social media far quicker actually than local people too.
And I think it is a huge issue for the department. I think in the briefing that we're going to get in a few minutes, consultation process, 29 responses. Right, what is going on? So there is a huge issue there. And you think of the information we generate on our website, at this committee, we have information coming out our ears. But how many people beyond the confines of this room So, and it's not our fault that we're not generating it, or if people are supplying it. It's what you do with it then, is how you target. So I think point well made, and I think we should pursue it. Joanne?
Yes, Chair, thanks. I thought it was an excellent event. The only thing I would say, I know at my table they were very keen to get the roundtable discussions going. There seemed to be maybe too many speakers. Even if maybe they did the round the table in the middle of it or broke it up a wee bit, I was delighted to see the 2 students are at my table, one female interest in STEM subjects. I know young women are becoming increasingly interested, but we need to get even more of them. Afterwards, I was chatting to John Haley from Citibank, and interesting conversation. He himself did engineering, and I know I grew up on about this quite often. My son did engineering, and we lost him to banking as well. So there's a massive brain drain out there that are doing engineering, the traditional subjects, but they're going into banking, other subjects. I was telling him as well. Elliot did his work experience with Bombardier, went to university in England, that was it, contact dead. So I do think we need to, maybe our Northern Ireland companies need to have an outreach programme where they go into schools and tell them about offers of jobs in engineering, or reach out to our students. But I think when we are getting them interested and getting them doing the STEM subjects, we're just letting them slide through our fingers, and I think that's a great loss.
Trevor?
Yeah, just come back to Chris and Jonathan's point about how we as a committee would try and promote these various agenda. I think our capacity to do that is quite limited, actually. What we're about here is influencing departmental policy, and it seems to me in terms of the STEM agenda that everybody is pushing the STEM agenda except for the department and the Inspectorate. What's the benchmark for achievement at GCSE? There's 5 GCSEs, including English and Maths. It doesn't mention, well, the Maths, okay, technically as the end of STEM, but the technical parts of it are not there. It's just optional, and I think we should be trying to push the department to try and prioritise certain subjects. I don't know to what extent they can do that, because when you offer an entitlement framework of 27 subjects, you're given a very wide choice. But maybe they should bring in a further benchmark in terms of STEM achievement. Simple as that,
Robin?
Chair, I agree with what folk are saying around the table in terms of the STEM event. I found the most exciting part of it was the presentation by Steve Orr and the video that he showed. That was, for me, the key to it. I just wonder, what do the department have in their toolkit for promoting STEM? And I just wonder if maybe that particular video might not be useful to the department, and whether they would want to engage with the Science Park and Steve Orr in particular to actually see whether or not that could be made available for promotion in schools throughout Northern Ireland.
He has another film, he told me afterwards, that's coming out in about 2 weeks' time, which will upgrade that one.
Well, see, the other thing too is, if we go on to, which is the next item we just want to raise, is ESIG TV, is the talk, which is based in the North Eastern Education Library Board. It's a huge resource, and we saw it operate, or so made reference to it when we were the BT Young Scientists through the STEM bus, and it's the same people. So there are ways whereby something like that can be accessed. So. Okay, so I think we're reasonably content with the report back to the department, and then I think we need to do a bit more work as to how we tie it up with the point that Chris made in relation to how we get that message out. Okay. The ESIG TV, during their evidence session for the inquiry, we heard about Every School a Good School TV, and it's a service provided by the NELB which showcases values of best practice, which ties in with what we were discussing. So I propose that we write to the Chief Executive of the NELB and request that we would get a visit and a tour of the facilities. It's based in the Hampton Board Centre, and we could tie it in with an event that we're planning to attend, I think, at Greenmount, isn't that right? Yeah. Which is literally only down the road from it, so we'll try and put something together. Sean?
Just, could we possibly even get a link to that we could even see some of the things online ourselves as well? Yeah.
NELB, if you go on the North Eastern Education Library Board,
I'll circulate the link
yes.
to members, but if you just go ESIG TV or NELB TV, you can see what they've got. There's quite a lot to look at.
Okay, the draft minutes of the 22nd of January, are pages 6 to 11, read. Okay, quickly moving on, members, so that we can, just a couple of things I want to raise in relation to matters arising. Pages 13 to 100, you'll find further information relating to the inquiry by the Committee into the Education and Training Inspector. This includes a draft summary of the issues raised at the District Inspector's informal briefing on the 24th of January. I'm sure you will agree that this was a very useful and a very informative event, and can I just thank those who attended. Can I also thank Peter and the staff for the huge work that they did in putting it together. I think there was a sort of a concern being expressed by the district inspectors. They were a bit unsure as to what it was they were coming into. But I think as the evening went on, they discovered that they weren't in the lion's den, and I think it was a useful exchange. I have to say I was very, very impressed by the sheer professionalism of the people who were in that room, and they are. I think it confirms all that we've heard to date in relation to the district inspector. Obviously, members will be content that we would share the draft summary with the district inspectors for amendment and also with the Department for Information. Have enough? Yes. You'll find also further information from Parents Out Loud and their transcript of the Chief Inspector's interview with Radio Ulster on the 8th of January. You'll also see a departmental response on the IME Inspector's parental questionnaires, ETI resources and data requirements and self-evaluation. Also in tabled items, we have a response from ETI Independence and a response on the third-party assessments and the customer service review undertaken by ETI. And I think what we would maybe do in relation to all of that is write to the department seeking clarity on a number of things. One, the qualifications, teaching and school leadership experience of the ETI inspectors. There's a few teachers amongst them, but there wasn't just what is the. I think we had about half of them in terms of the complement of ETI inspectors. The apparent increases in the ETI's budget, which is different to what we were told, so there's a bit of a conflict there. The ratio of ETI inspectors to the actual number of school visits is compared with, say, other jurisdictions. The Chief Inspector reported remarks on Radio Ulster relating to the frequency of sustaining improvement inspections, and also the Department's view in respect of, again, ETI's independence. We have a fair idea what that is, but I think we should get it. The other thing was, I think we need to include in that, they did raise this issue, and it'll be interesting to get a comment on it. The practice previously had been that the district inspector was involved in the inspection team. Seems as though the practice now is that they are less and less involved. Now, why is that the case? Is it a strategic policy decision? But it is causing, and also the issue of the number of hours, the number of days has been, so they are being put under a huge amount of pressure. And I was in a school just last week where they had an inspection. I have to say, the school felt that there was a different approach being adopted in terms of the current process, and it just is worrying that that still seems to be what we're getting fed by.
You don't get the impression, Chair, that they were being run down, the district inspectors. That was almost the first comment we got.
I got the impression as though they felt under pressure. Yeah. Okay. Also, I think we should write to the department seeking their commentary on the proposals in the Parents Out Loud submission that we've received. Are we content to note the information and it be published on the committee's webpage? Finally, during the district inspector event, reference was made to the process of school evaluation and to related guidance document called Together Towards Improvement. In order to inform their understanding of these matters, members wanted to visit a school during an inspection. Obviously, this wouldn't be possible. I don't think it would be fair either. It's bad enough as landing in a school at any day of the week, but landing when there was an inspection on, I think it would just make the situation intolerable for the school. However, Antrim Grammar School has agreed to facilitate a lunchtime visit on Tuesday the 4th of March during which, because obviously it's either after, I think they have there's a date set maybe for their inspection.
I think it's actually just an informal pastoral visit from their district inspector. The 2 weeks.
So the staff would explain the self-evaluation and inspection process over a working lunch, which will give us a school's perspective in relation to it. The clerk has also asked ETI if it would provide an oral briefing next week so as to inform members' understanding of the self-evaluation and school inspection process. And I think we're also expecting some middle-ranking ETI officials to provide this oral briefing. That's what I'm reading here. It's written down to me, so don't blame me, blame the scribe. So if that's the case, we'll confine our question next week to self-evaluation and inspection and defer the wider questions for ETI until the Chief Inspector comes to us on the 12th of March. On that, have we set aside a date for us to have our get-together in preparation for the 12th of March?
Well, I planned, Chair, as you can see in the draft forward work programme, that the week before I would put before the committee some draft recommendations, so that could serve as a reminder of where we are with the inquiry. And then on the day, they've cleared the agenda, so it's only Noel Buick and her officials that would be coming that day, so the committee could meet informally for an hour or so in advance of her coming along, decide the order of questions, what they might want to do, a questioning strategy, and then have the briefing at, say, 11 o'clock or so, if that would suit.
Does that sound reasonable to members? Happy enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you're content with all of that, and we'll move then from matters arising to the briefing from the Department, Inquiry into Education Training Inspector and School Improvement Process.
Sorry, Chair, just before you start, sorry,
Yes.
Members, worst offender, we just had some complaints from the PI that they can't actually hear what members are saying, so if you just make sure your microphones are pointed at your face and they're not in the way of your computer's not in the way.
That's probably okay. You'll want your tablets to be getting on the road. Okay, members, you'll find the clerk's covering note at pages 102 to 107 and a paper from the Department summarising the responses to the consultation on the formal intervention process at page 108, along with other relevant correspondence from the Department. I also recall that originally officials were due to brief the committee on the 27th of November, but this was postponed due to the late receipt of a briefing paper from the Department. So today's briefing will be recorded by Hansard, and we welcome to the committee this morning Mr David Hughes, Director of Curriculum, Qualifications and the Standards Directorate at the Department, and also Karen McCulloch, Planning and Performance Management at the Department. You're very welcome. Apologies for keeping you, but thank you for coming. Thanks for the information that has been provided, and David and Karen will ask you to speak to the issue, and then members will have questions.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to brief the committee. I'll set a little bit of context, and Karen will speak about the specific proposals and the consultation responses received. The committee will be aware that the Department's School Improvement Policy, Every School a Good School, ESAGS for short, was introduced in April 2009. And that was intended to set out an overarching approach to raising standards and tackling underachievement in all schools. The purpose behind it was to support school leaders, support the boards of governors and teachers in implementing good practice in their school to address any barriers to learning that pupils may face and to improve the outcomes for all pupils. The underlying principle is that it's schools themselves, through open and honest self-evaluation, who are best placed to identify and implement changes that will bring about improved outcomes for their pupils. A critical element of the policy was the introduction of a set of formal procedures to ensure that there would be follow-up on all published school inspection reports, so that where a school's inspection report came out outstanding or very good, demonstrating outstanding or very good practice, that would be shared and made available more widely, so that action plans developed by a school with support from the managing authorities for any areas that need further development or improvement. And in addition, there would be more intensive support provided where provision was less than satisfactory. So the Every School a Good School policy included the introduction of a formal intervention process, or FIP, FIP currently provides a robust intervention and support arrangements when a school is evaluated as less than satisfactory. And that process, the FIP, is outlined in Annex C of the strategy document, of the ESAG's document, which can be found. The formal intervention process is one of a number of processes aimed at school improvement. The focus throughout these is on ensuring that the pupils receive the highest possible quality of teaching and learning so that they can fulfil their full potential. Schools receive tailored support from either the relevant Education and Library Board, CCMS, for the Catholic maintained sector. The school commits to working with the board or CCMS to deliver an agreed action plan to address the areas for improvement identified in the inspection report. That action plan is quality assured by the Inspectorate, who monitor and report on the school's progress in addressing the areas for improvement. What that process has achieved is a much greater focus on school improvement following inspection. That focus being applied by schools, by the boards of governors of schools, by the boards and CCMS. And as a result, we've seen that 80% of schools who have entered the process have improved, meaning a significant improvement in the life chances of the pupils in those schools. So we calculate that about 3,500 pupils have been in schools that have exited the formal intervention process and are now getting a better standard of education. Now, that process, we believe, is working well. However, there have been a number of proposals to improve it and to clarify elements of it that we wanted to test with key stakeholders. And so, excuse me, the revisions that were put to consultation were intended to improve the overall quality of education in an area through the refinement of the formal intervention process, to clarify some elements of the procedures, but critically to reduce the length of time that pupils are in schools where the quality of education provision is satisfactory or less. And to ensure that where school is judged to be satisfactory and do not improve to good, that they too are receiving the tailored support they need. Fundamentally, it is about ensuring that children spend time in education, experience the highest quality teaching and learning available to them, and ensuring that schools get support in doing that. So I'll pass to Karen, who will go through the specific proposals.
Thank you. The questionnaires on this were issued to all schools, boards, CCMS, CNG, NICE, GBA, ETI, GTCNI, ESA and the teaching unions. And by the closing date, we had just 26 responses. 5 responses were received after that, so we had 31 in total to this responses to consultation. So there are kind of 4 areas where we made proposals. The aim of the first proposal was to clarify the managing authority's plans for a school that's going into FIP, so that the support relevant to the circumstances of the school and its pupils could be developed. The proposal suggested that the formal intervention process would include an immediate assessment of a school's sustainability, taking account of their local area plans. So if the school that's going into FIP is identified in the area plan as part of the future education provision in the area, the managing authority will be asked to confirm that that remains the case. Where a school that's going into FIP has been highlighted in the area plan to be closed or merged, we would be asking the managing authority within 6 months to submit a plan, including timescales and proposals for the future education provision of pupils at the school. So, stakeholders were asked whether any factors other than the area plan should be taken into account, and just 19 respondents suggested other factors. 5 mentioned the stability of school leadership, and a number of respondents asked for consideration of special circumstances of schools, for example, depending on their location, the management type or characteristics of the school's pupils needed to be taken account of as well. In the comments that we got on this proposal, questions were raised about the reality of moving at the suggested pace that we were proposed. And there was also a comment that inspection findings shouldn't be linked to any process other than school improvement. And I think that the responses highlighted the needs for us to be very explicit about the fact that this proposal was about clarifying plans and ensuring that we can quickly move to improve the standards of education for pupils. The second proposal looked at revised timings of follow-up inspections for schools in FIP. So currently what happens, if you have an inspection finding that's less than satisfactory, 12 to 18 months later you have a first follow-up inspection, 12 months later a second follow-up inspection. So the proposal was that when the school entered formal intervention, they'd just have one follow-up inspection within 18 to 24 months of the original inspection, with the timing being informed by 2 interim follow-up visits in between that time that would help inform that timing. At that point then, if the school after 2 years continues to have a less than satisfactory evaluation at the follow-up, then we were suggesting that further action should be considered. So in respect of those 2 elements, in the first one about reducing it to 1 inspection, almost all respondents, 27 out of the 28 who expressed a view, agreed with that rather having 2 follow-up inspections, schools in FIP should have 1 follow-up inspection. There was also a high-level agreement, as I say, with that, comments suggesting that the 18 to 24 months provides a more appropriate time frame, which allows schools time to address the issues raised. Another one suggested that there shouldn't be any interim visits from ETI because that would be classed as an inspection, whereas really it was a visit. A similarly high proportion of respondents, 23 of the 27 who expressed a view, agreed that if a school's in FIP and it hasn't improved to at least satisfactory evaluation after 24 months, further action should be considered. A minority commented that they felt that schools which hadn't made sufficient progress should be given an opportunity for a second inspection. Most agreed with the comments that further action should be considered because education and life chances of pupils in any such school may be seriously hindered in the absence of such action. Under this proposal, we also asked stakeholders to consider the case of those schools that had gone into FIP because they were less than satisfactory at the first inspection, and at the follow-up inspection, having received 2 years of support, are found to be satisfactory. And it was proposed that such schools should have a further follow-up inspection within 12 months, at which point we'd be expecting that they've improved its provision to at least good or further action, so it's that continued improvement. Respondents' opinion on this was more mixed. 12 respondents agreeing and 9 disagreeing. The concerns expressed were in relation to the length of time we were proposing giving schools and the nature of any further action that might be taken. So the concerns were that the impact of these proposals would be to assign a time limit to a satisfactory judgment, with the threat that if the measurable improvement isn't visible within a specified period, the school would be in effect being treated in the same way as a school where provision is less than satisfactory, even if it had managed to sustain its initial improvement. Whilst agreeing with the concept of a move towards every school a good school and the proposed time frame, some respondents cautioned that some schools may need just longer to secure a good in all areas, particularly where they were facing a range of complex issues, which can often take a bit longer to sort out. There were also a number of comments related to the interpretation of the term satisfactory. On the one hand, some felt that satisfactory was acceptable, and on the others, those who felt satisfactory wasn't good enough, adding that a school shouldn't exit FIP until it's received a good inspection. The third proposal looked at clarifying arrangements for schools that are in FIP that then are evaluated as satisfactory at the follow-up inspection. And what we wanted to do was make it more explicit that a school won't automatically exit FIP on an ETI evaluation of satisfactory. Instead, and what's actually happened in practice sometimes, the decision about exiting FIP will be based on all of the available evidence, including a recommendation from the managing authority. Again, opinion on that was mixed, 14 agreeing, 12 disagreeing. Those in agreement believed that the different circumstances should be taken into consideration, particularly the information from the employing authorities, or managing authorities, sorry. And it was suggested that no school should exit formal intervention unless its outcome is at least good. The proposal, like one of that previous question we'd asked, generated comments on the use of the term satisfactory. And it was suggested that if this proposal is agreed, it indicates that the current use of the term satisfactory to describe the quality of provision of a school is a misnomer, and that it would be better described as improvement required. The final proposal looked at revising arrangements to support satisfactory schools where improvement is proving either difficult or unsustainable. The expectation in Every School a Good School is that all schools should be striving to be at least good. However, we're aware that in a small number of cases, schools haven't improved their provision from satisfactory over quite a number of inspection cycles. And since the implementation of Every School a Good School back in April 2009, 13 schools have fallen into that category. Respondents were asked whether they agreed that a school evaluated as satisfactory should have a maximum of up to 2 follow-up inspections, the first after 12 to 18 months and then the second after 12 months, to improve provision to at least good before further actions considered. Again, opinion more divided on this one. 12 respondents saying yes, 10 no, 5 not sure, but very few respondents offered further comment, although that point was reiterated about the use of the term satisfactory. There was stronger agreement with the suggestion that further action should be considered when a satisfactory school is evaluated as satisfactory in 2 follow-up inspections, with 16 respondents agreeing. The key messages in the comments from that were that the quality of education provision should be at least good, but it was also noted that sustained improvement should be recognised and further consideration given as to why the school hasn't been able to improve within the given timescale. Depending on where they are in their improvement journey, some schools may require more time, and consideration should therefore be made on an individual school basis with high-quality external targeted support provided to facilitate improvement. A final question that respondents were asked was whether, in addition to the further actions that were outlined in Every School a Good School Annex C, whether there are any other actions we should consider taking where schools haven't secured the necessary improvements in provision. 10 respondents said yes, they should, and we just made a range of suggestions, including extra funding, educating the community, lowering the quota for grammar schools in an area where there's demographic downturn, and employing, seconding, incentivising effective principals with a proven track record to work with the schools to take up leadership roles. So that was the feedback.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, David. Given the small number of respondents, so basically 70% of schools didn't respond, and it wasn't all schools that actually responded, it was organisations. Is there not now a serious issue as to how you can ascertain as to what is the real views of the system that would ultimately be subjected to any proposed changes? And how because we were struggling with this issue earlier on, as to how we, as a committee, make information available to people beyond the confines of this room. And the department is in a more difficult place in that it has a responsibility, albeit partly devolved to managing authorities, the everyday running of schools. But with such a fundamental change, or a proposal to change the intervention process, is there not a concern, David, that this sort of consultation process is so fundamentally flawed or damaged that it couldn't be implemented as it's currently proposed?
I think I'd make the point that the proposed changes are to the formal intervention process as it exists and has been working for a number of years. It is an adjustment of a process that I think schools will either be familiar with because they actually have experienced it, or familiar with because they're aware of the arrangements as they exist even if their school itself hasn't been affected by it. It's extending quite logically the position that the Every School a Good School policy has taken. It's not taking a radically different approach. It is adjusting it and clarifying it, and in fact making the point that when the department's strategy is called Every School a Good School, that is really what we are all aiming for. So in many ways, I'm not so very concerned about the small number of respondents, because it wasn't introducing something. It wasn't introducing a radically new policy. It was adjusting and developing one that already exists. And so that I would be fairly confident that if there were a very strong view, and I know that some views coming back from some consultation respondents were quite strongly expressed, consultees would have made that response. I think that's my point.
If you take the point that Karen raised in relation to the change of terminology around satisfactory, because there is a debate, what do we mean by satisfactory? Is there not an issue that arises that needs to be further expanded on, and that is the sheer use of the word formal intervention process? Because, and it goes to the heart of what is this all about? Why do we have this process? If we have Every School a Good School, and that's what I think everybody buys into, that policy. Goes back to a comment we made earlier on about the department. The policy generally is the right road of direction, of travel, but it seems the wheels fell off the cart whenever it goes to be implemented, and it gets into all sorts of problems. The minute you place on a school a title, a label, formal intervention, that's like being sent to the front door of the headmaster. The pupil is outside waiting for whatever is going to come. Is there not a serious issue then that comes out of that, that if you're wanting to look at the use of the phrase, and I would agree the terminology and the categories need to be amended, but do we need to even go back a wee bit further and say, well, look, we have to call this something different rather than, and that's where maybe the consultation went badly wrong, in that the department didn't seek feedback on the FIP as to whether it should include assessment on schools' sustainability. But yet many schools believe that what this is all about is in conjunction with and in association with area planning, and whether or not ultimately that school will stay in existence.
I think the point you make about the name of the process is very well made, and I think it's certainly something that we have been considering internally, because some of the responses made it very clear that the perspective on the formal intervention process is that it is punitive, whereas in particular I would say the perspective for those who have not been through it is that it is punitive. And the formal intervention process does sound slightly threatening. Yeah. If the process had a different title, a different name, and we were able effectively to make the point that its value is that it is supportive, then we may be in a different place. It needs to be supportive, because it needs to both challenge and support the schools in improvement. So I think you make a very valid point about the perception of the process, and that is an element of what we need to be working on.
One final query which I can't maybe fully work out in my own mind was either yourself or Karen made reference to the point that the process is quality assured by the Inspectorate. So it's the exit is quality assured by the Inspectorate. Was that what was being said? I think it was David, you made reference to quality assurance by the Inspectorate.
Of the action plans, the school's
yes, of the action plans, right.
Yeah.
Now, excuse me. Is that not the police investigating themselves?
The action plan is the school's action plan.
Yes, but it's a school action plan. But surely it should be in conjunction with the Inspectorate and the District Inspector in the first place. So how, because there is this growing concern, and the reason why I ask that is this. We now know that the Inspectorate is asked for comment on development proposals. So if there's a development proposal published, the Inspectorate is asked for its opinion. How then can the Inspectorate be an independent arbiter as to whether or not that action plan is fit for purpose to address the needs of that particular school if it has some other view as to what should be the long-term sustainability and future of that school?
I think it's important to completely distinguish the two.
But can you?
Evaluations.
Because they're so inextricably linked, forbid us using that phrase, in Northern Ireland. But how do you draw that distinction?
The development of the school's action plan will be against what the Inspectorate has identified are the areas that need improvement in the educational provision in the school.
Right, okay.
And I think if there weren't the reference to the Inspectorate as a professional body of educationists outside the school, then one wouldn't necessarily have the assurance of the adequacy of the action plan to address the issues the Inspectorate have raised. And that's about the quality of the educational provision. And I'm not sure how one makes the connection between that and issues of development plans. I'm sorry, I confess I'm not familiar with every detail of the area planning process and the production of development plans. So I'm looking at the school improvement process.
Well, it's reasonably straightforward. School, a board, whoever decides, it's only a board that can bring forward a development proposal, or CCMS, brings forward a development proposal to close School A. We now know that the Inspectorate is asked, what's your opinion on that development proposal? So, is the Inspectorate's information, how is that information validated in such a way that it is not biased against a particular school? Because we are dealing with the Inspectorate, who is part and parcel of the senior management team of the department, whose view may be in conjunction with the board that School A has to close. And that's what I can't...
I can't comment on the professional advice given by inspectors. And I think that may be a question to raise with the Inspectorate rather than the officials.
If
you want to...
Just to say, and this is only from personal experience, I've seen it, the action plans that come from the schools that go to the Inspectorate. I mean, it really, in my experience, has been about, the assessment is, having been in the school, the inspector being in the school, is this the right set of actions to address the issues that they saw within the school, and about the provision of the the education there? Is it the right things to do that? And then that gets reflected into the school's development plan, the SDP, school development plan, to pick up, because it's all about the quality of the education, and is this going to do the right things for the children in that school? And that, my personal experience has been that that's what it's concentrated on. It's very professional in its response.
Jonathan, thank you.
David, good to see you again. I'm sure you're glad to be in education at the moment. David, not only is there an issue with the name and an issue with the titles given, I suppose, by the final inspector's report, is there not a real issue around how help or assistance, or even the means by which the inspection itself is carried out? Because I noted, I was listening, and you said there should be high quality targeted support given to the school. Now, I applaud you for that. Yes, there should be. But in reality, nothing is given.
But I think
I'm speaking from experience here. I can tell you now, nothing is given. You're given a small level of assistance from the particular board you're in. With regard to the Inspectorate themselves, they're very much a stick in this aspect. They come in, they condemn, they tell you exactly what's wrong here, there and everywhere, and then they disappear. Now, you know, that process is incredibly damaging for any school. It's not supportive, it's not helpful, and they normally highlight, in practically every school that goes into intervention, I've noted, they highlight serious managerial issues. And this is the other thing, David. Once you highlight a serious managerial issue, even if it was being addressed at the time, or it was about to be addressed, or it's going to be addressed, we all know about senior management positions within education. We're talking approximately 2 years before you can actually sort that issue out. Because that's the reality of education. Now, so it's a long-term process. I'm just interested, what is this high-quality targeted support we're talking about here? Because at the minute, I don't see it.
Well, I mean, I'd make the point that the support that goes to schools is coming from the boards and from CCMS. The CAS service in the boards, the focus of their work is with schools who are in this process. And therefore, there is the support that's coming out from the boards to the schools in order to help them. And it's very important that it is about supporting the self-evaluation and self-improvement. It's not that the CAS service is doing it for the school or to the school, but rather supporting the school so that the school itself is able to identify an action plan which will address the issues that have been brought to its attention by the inspection process, and is able to put that action plan into place. And in so doing, is developing the capacity, therefore, for continued self-evaluation and self-improvement. So responding positively to what is being brought to their attention and then being able to take it forward.
Well, to be honest with you, David, all schools do react to any report. The interesting thing the Chair was talking about earlier, and it is factual, the first thing the inspectors actually do is an audit on the viability of the school. Why would that be?
Well, I'm not in a position to speak for the way in which the Inspectorate conducts its inspections. I mean, specific questions like that would need to be raised with the Inspectorate.
You know, surely the whole thing about inspection is you go in to look at the quality of teaching in a school, and as you say, it's either satisfactory, unsatisfactory, good, excellent, all of those criteria.
I think it's important to make the point that they're evaluating the quality of the educational provision. So teaching is the main large part of that, but it's not the entirety of it.
No, but it is interesting that they do a complete audit of the school and its viability and future viability. Why would that be part of the inspection report? What's that got to do with the quality of teaching in the school?
Again, I mean, I think you're asking a question which I'm not in a position to answer, but is a question for the Inspectorate and the way they conduct their inspection.
Mm-hmm. And the other issue is the lack of people that have, you know, contributed to your consultation process. You know, have you even looked at what the rationale behind that is? Is there a lack of interest out there, which I doubt? Or is there still a fear factor out there? And there's a lot of schools out there who've went through this process over the past 5 to 10 years. I just wonder, David, how many of them have actually made a return to you on this? Or are they, I suspect, just like every other school, afraid to?
Well, I don't know if we have the detail of whether any of the schools or any of those who've responded reflect excuse me, reflect the views of a school which has actually been through the process. I don't know if we have that information. I'm not sure what you are implying by the fear factor of responding to a consultation by the department.
Work it out, David. If you've got yourself out of the process, you will not want to upset the apple cart in any way, shape or form, because you'll find yourself back in the process. And that is the fear, the real fear that's out there.
Sorry, could I just pick up on a point? And sorry, I don't know the personal, the circumstances of your particular school, but just going back to the evidence that we have about whether this FIP works or not and people's reaction to being in it. I mean, one of the things that we do is meet with the Board of Governors of schools that are in FIP, and a message that comes across from them is it's not pleasant when you hear your findings and you are put into this formal intervention process, which is actually a support, as you said, then it's a support package. But I'd say generally what the comments that come back to us are about, one of the things they acknowledge is the support that they've been given. They do, by the boards, CCMS and by ETI, that in the longer term, it does help focus on school improvement, and that's what it's driving that. And also, I was thinking there about that's kind of qualitative evidence we have of it, and the quantitative. I mean, there's the NISRA survey that people who've been inspected complete, and the findings there are very positive. Well, you've probably seen all of the information that there is about that, about the contribution that they're making. But I mean, when they talk to leaders in the school, 93% are saying that they feel they've been treated fairly. The inspection process has helped the school and organisation to plan for and promote improvement in the outcomes of learners. I mean, so there's kind of quantitative evidence there as well, just to say that although it's, in the longer run it does help improve.
They're very small numbers, Yeah.
But it's of those who've been inspected, who've gone through the process, and I think that's a very valid point.
Well, I think that's an interesting issue, David. I'd be grateful if you do a bit of research into that. How many schools that have been through this process actually responded, and if they didn't respond, is there any way of finding out the rationale as to why they wouldn't? Because they're the ones with the real experience as to how this happened.
And I think that's a good thing in the process that we have, that we do talk to the people who've gone through it while they're going through it as well, so that we can pick up on things like that. But
because, I hate to say it, but those that have been through the pain are the ones who will know exactly what issues are real and what issues aren't.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Gerald?
Thanks, and you're welcome. Thank you. I suppose it's just to take on a point there from Jonathan. You've mentioned quite often this morning, David, the idea of support from management authorities, supportive and so on. Does the department feel that the education and library boards have sufficient resources in order to address the issues when a school falls into formal intervention?
We're aware that the boards will prioritise the support to schools in FIP in terms of allocation resources of their CAS service and the resources of their CAS service. It hasn't been brought specifically to my attention that they feel that they are unable to provide the support to schools in FIP. But I think it's also recognised that the current position of the CAS service is that there would still be room for there to be more support given to schools, but they are prioritising schools in FIP.
Yeah, they are prioritising. Okay, and when they were in here with us, they are struggling. I don't know if there's for example, if for example your school falls into formal intervention, as particularly say for example history. I don't know how many, if any, history CAS officers are left in the north, and I know in my own board area, for example, in maths, for example, all they can do is actually firefight. Do you think that's a reasonable place to be? If we want to raise standards, if all they can do is firefight. Because there are teachers who are maybe not in the formal intervention stage, but not far behind, and they're at a position where they really need help. There's no help there. Have you, for example, as you sit in the department and discuss things with your accountant friends in the department, do you bring it home to them that the severe cuts they are making, for example, in staff development within their budgets, is having a terrible effect on raising standards?
There's certainly excuse me. Sorry. There's there's certainly a recognition that the reduction in strengths of the CAS service in the boards has been very dramatic, and that with the proposals to establish ESA was also the proposal to have, as part of that, a school development service. And that not being progressed leaves the CAS service generally in a weakened position, because it's neither what it was nor what it should be. I do recognise that there is a real challenge there. I'm not sure whether the answer will ever be to revert to the levels of resourcing that existed in the past, partially because of the levels of resourcing in the public sector generally, partially also the recognition that there is a future position where the available support which actually already exists within the education system is possibly not yet being tapped to the degree that it might be, in that support is not necessarily always to come from a board or an equivalent external authority, but there is a huge amount of expertise in other schools as well, and that is not an answer in itself, but there is clearly the need to establish a model of school to board or ESA or whatever authority it is support, but also school to school support, because of the expertise that already exists.
Yeah, but school to school support has implications for the school that's providing the support as well. But you talked about you don't know if the potential has been tapped. Has the potential within the department, within the ETI, to take a lead on school improvement, has that been tapped, do you think?
I think there are some developments in the way in which ETI will be able to provide support following that pattern of an inspectorate. And at the moment, I know that that inspectors are working with a number of schools in respect to the teaching of English and maths. That is a departure from the previous pattern and is taking it in a particular direction. I think you get a fuller and more sensible answer from inspectors who know the detail of how they're taking that forward. There are other forms of support as well, which will all need to be developed, because, of course, for example, SEA also has a function in terms of the support of the delivery of the curriculum, and they also have resource that can be used in a supportive fashion. So, at the moment, we have been in a position of moving from one model with the CAS service in the boards to school development service in ESA.
But I think, you know, your inspectorate they as well as they witness some fantastic teaching out there, and they have such a wealth of information there in terms of doing this. But how are they going to develop that role if then, on the other hand, there's been 20% cut of the budget for ETI? How you know, when you listen to the inspectorate, how are they going to be able to give more for less?
I think you need to ask questions about the business model of ETI, and inspectors, and I'm not in a position to give any detail.
Okay.
On that.
Well, then, just one other point, and there was a point was raised about the formal intervention, these terms and the language. Will you be looking at the future in terms of this language of unsatisfactory and inadequate? Because if somebody tells me I'm unsatisfactory, and particularly if they tell me inadequate, it certainly doesn't do anything to boost my confidence. And, you know, morale can be low, and particularly when somebody asked a question earlier about there have been viability audits already carried out, but here you're coming again to look at sustainability, etc., which links to a very high stake of whether my school stays open or closed. I'm just thinking of the language, the unsatisfactory and inadequate. If somebody tells me I have development needs and they can itemise them, that's okay.
I think you make a good point about the perception of what the labels of the evaluation categories actually feel as though they mean, as well as the definition that the inspectorate use. Now, it would be for the inspectorate to be looking at that rather than for me and my team. to be looking at that use of language. But I think the fact that it's been raised here, I know it's been raised elsewhere, the fact of the language around whether satisfactory actually means satisfactory by a dictionary definition, these are things which we're taking on board and which I know that the Inspectorate is aware of. Was there anything?
Yes, and I think when the Chief Inspector came to the committee, she'd mentioned that they'd be undertaking a review of performance levels and engaging with the sector during 2014. And so we can feed this into that process.
Just as a point of information, because I find this intriguing, David, has there been a policy change at present that no school is going to get out of intervention until they are deemed good?
That's not. No, that was one of the proposals that was here.
Have a good reason for asking that?
No, that's not the case. Everyone, when a school's been in formal intervention and it then gets a satisfactory, we go through that process of saying, you know, the ETI evidence is just one of the elements that's looked at. I mean, that's a wider consultation about whether the schools should exit formal intervention or not.
Because
so
it's
no,
quite
it's
right
not,
that
but that's
they
one of the
drive
things
the school towards being good and not just satisfactory. I agree with that. But there is an underlying issue there. You know, have they moved the goalposts?
Well, is the answer to that not? What's the evidence of any school that has come out of FIB that was deemed satisfactory?
Yeah, we do have schools like that. You know, so when we get the satisfactory, there are schools do come out of FIP. There's some minority that actually don't.
And it's satisfactory in all areas. It's not just satisfactory.
It's the overall satisfactory. Yeah.
Okay, Chris.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for the disclosures on the fact that I maybe come slightly differently to it. I'm not sure how other members feel it. I don't think we should be accepting satisfactory at all. I actually agree with maybe what they've done in England and getting rid of the term altogether. Your school's either good, at least good, or it's not good enough. And I think we do waste a bit of time around the notion of satisfactory. We should just be binning it, and we need to be moving out of it. And again, I was alarmed in that the Chief Inspector implied on the radio recently something around, hold on, I just see it, that every satisfactory school within 2 years of its original inspection would receive an improvement inspection. Is it more than 2 years presently? Can a school that's deemed satisfactory go more than 2 years without a sustainable inspection?
I think it's meant to be 12 to 18 months. I mean, it's laid out in this quality.
I know it's meant to be, but
I don't know what it is in practice, but as far as I'm aware, that's what's
because again, I would be very alarmed at that. We want to be moving out of satisfactory as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And
No, sorry, it's 18 to 24 months.
18 to 24 months is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that it's probably not. So that would be alarming for myself. I just wanted, I know you did mention, David, that discussions are going on around the term satisfactory, around various terms. You know, is there an idea maybe of losing that term?
I couldn't comment on the discussion that's taking place within the Inspectorate, who would actually be taking the decision on how that is done. I know that it would be a matter of engagement, but they would be in the lead on how that would be taken forward.
Okay. Would you yourselves as a department have any discussions perhaps with colleagues in England around their decision to remove the satisfactory term? What fed that? What has been the effect, or any sort of dialogue at all there?
Again, I'm not aware of whether the Inspectorate is speaking to their inspector colleagues, but it hasn't been a matter of discussion between the policy division and any policy officials in England. I'm not sure whether the policy was taken by the department or by the Inspectorate in England, so I must admit I'm not aware of that.
No, that's okay. Most of the other things have been more or less covered. Just a final question, I suppose, on the 20% cut. What has been the effect of that, and what's likely to be the effect going forward?
20% cut on
the Inspectorate, their budget.
Again, you may be asking questions which are for the Inspectorate to answer. The inspection they maintain an inspection programme. There are still schools which are evaluated as unsatisfactory or inadequate, and so on. There are still schools going into formal intervention. Those schools are still getting the support from the boards and from CCMS, and boards are going into formal schools are going into formal intervention, are seeing improvement and coming out, which I think when we're looking at whether the process works, I'd come back to this point about the benefits to the children who happen to be in that school at that time, and they are seeing an improvement in the educational provision that they receive. That still goes on, and I think that's probably the most critical point.
Donald?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. David and Karen, thank you. When you put out I'm afraid I'm not really concentrating on the excellent detail you've prepared from what you've learned, but more on why you didn't get good responses or number of responses. Do you chase up on a response to get people to respond, or do you just send it out and let the world respond?
This was sent out, and then there was a reminder sent out because we extended the time period again to give more time. Yeah, we did. We went out and asked it, and then we were told, that's too short a time period to come back to us, so we extended, and then let everybody know again that we'd extended the time period.
So, I mean, you mentioned, Karen, that you said you do talk to people, and you must therefore get, and I don't mean that glibly, but you must therefore get a feeling, because I was slightly concerned, David, with your comment that you felt that if people had something they really wanted to say, they would respond. I think there's a danger that hiding behind it all is a fear of the system, or that no one's listening. And at the same time, if you look at the questions, there isn't an opening at the end really encouraging to say, is there something else really important? They're responding that we're getting stuck in our silos. And I just wonder, from your comment that you're speaking to people, do you feel you've got a good response here that you can actually use and work with?
I think the responses come from a sufficient breadth of different respondents. I think if we had faced responses only from one type of respondent, particularly if it was only one type of respondent and the answers were all the same, then the consultation would be, I would have anxiety about a consultation being quite limited. But in actual fact, we got responses from quite a range of respondents, and in some places there were very clear differences of opinion, but very tellingly in others, there was considerable consensus of opinion on the issue. So in that way, there is still very, very definitely value in the consultation responses as a whole because of that difference.
And I think there were, that's a quantitative look at it. I don't think there was anything there that surprised us in the responses, because it is things that you hear people saying, this thing about how long it is, the names of the things, what does satisfactory mean, and a lot of it was needing to clarify the position, because if people thought a satisfactory, you were automatically out of formal intervention, it just providing clarity around that. So there was nothing there that was unexpected.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you've probably answered any question I might have, but this use of words, and perception is, I'm glad we're having a discussion about it, because I think it's far more important than people realise. I think frankly only the Department of Education, perhaps aided and abetted by the Inspectorate, could produce a situation where satisfactory and unsatisfactory mean the same thing, effectively, because they produce the same result, formal intervention. Try explaining that to a parent who's looking at a school with a view to sending their child there, and try and explain to them, how this school has a satisfactory rating from the Inspectorate. It's the nearest good school to where I live. It's where I'd like to send my parents and my children, but maybe your parent. But it's in formal intervention. It just doesn't make sense. You mentioned improvement required. You could toss words about all day here, but intervention is a loaded word. Yep. If a school's unsatisfactory, intervention, fair enough. If it's satisfactory or good, even a good school can require improvement. We're not. I know that the strapline is every school a good school, but in fact we're aiming for every school an excellent school. So, as usual, I can't quite form a question here, but there's
find one there somewhere.
There's the word assistance comes to mind, rather than intervention. If a school is satisfactory but requires a bit of work, well, then it requires assistance, and it doesn't require perhaps formal assistance, because that's a loaded word too. Formal means inescapable or compulsory. You know, there's all sorts of connotations to all these words. So I do hope, I think you said, David, that the Inspectorate really is charged with producing these descriptions. But perhaps the department could lean on them a bit to come up with something that would mean something to prospective parents.
Thank you. I think the Inspectorate will be looking at the categories. I think it's very interesting that it's the question of what satisfactory means is a considerable distraction from the impact of what we're aiming for, because what satisfactory is not, in the Inspectorate's current categorisations, it is not good.
Not good enough.
Well, it's not good. There is a good category, and therefore is not good enough. Exactly. And I think we need to probably remind ourselves that, yes, we are aiming for every school being a good school, because that is possible. And I think the point about the formal intervention process, yes, you're right, it does have a slightly threatening connotations. Intervention, I think, though, there is a point about this idea of intervention which is worth picking up on, that may not be the right word, but it has an important idea behind it, which is schools have a very great deal of autonomy, and the ideal is that schools are fundamentally relying upon self-evaluation and self-improvement. So for there to be intervention, that is another authority or another organisation coming to that school to provide support, is significant. And that's not necessarily a defence of the word intervention, but it explains why it's there. Do you see what I mean?
You could use the word support, you just used it. Assistance, support, advice. And there's a load of words out there which are far better than intervention. But if the school is in a bad enough state, well, then intervention is the right word, you know.
There's just a couple of points there. A good school does have to have an action plan, because there are areas for improvement, as you said. And the other thing is that formal intervention, as it's called, looks different for different schools depending on the circumstances. And I think the point was very well made when the CAS people were from the board. I think Mr. Gilbert from North Eastern made the point very well about, it depends where you are and the issues that you're being addressed as to how the package of support looks for that school. So it differs depending, it's bespoke to the school's circumstances.
I wouldn't disagree with that at all, but I still wonder how you explain this to parents, who would probably, mostly, including myself, would take a fairly simplistic view of things, and if a school's in formal intervention, that's a red light flashing for any parent, whether they've already got a pupil at the school or about to enrol them. And yet that may be that the school has also got a satisfactory rating, and it needs tidied up, Thank
you. Just to conclude, then, David, in terms of the numbers you gave us, or it's been intimated to us that there was 10 schools that had 2 consecutive satisfactory evaluations.
Over the time that we've had this, 13 schools have fallen into that category of going satisfactory to satisfactory. 10 primary went satisfactory, and 1 went inadequate, satisfactory. 8 post-primaries have gone satisfactory, and then 2 have gone with 3 satisfactories in a row. And at the moment, there are 2 primaries and 5 post-primaries in that position. So
what would be
quite small numbers over the...
Yeah. What's your assessment would be the implication if these proposals were adopted? And would it lead to a further 11 schools actually entering the formal intervention process?
Yeah, they would be targeted for some additional support, whatever it's called.
And we have a number of those.
Yeah, 7 at the moment.
At 7
across, yeah.
And are they all in the control sector?
Sorry, I don't know that.
So,
I could check that.
Yes, could you?
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
that would be useful.
Yes, but I think that's the category. I mean, when as David said, you know, when with the CAS service, the first target is the first group of schools that the target is support for is the formal intervention ones. They then have a group of schools, you know, that I think it's a second tier of schools that they will support, and I think one of the criteria they'd look at there is the schools that are sitting on satisfactory, you know, where they maybe need some additional support. But I don't know the level that's done. Again, that's the boards and CCMS.
And finally, can I just ask, who ultimately makes the decision, the final decision, in regards coming out of intervention?
The decision's taken in the department.
In the department?
Yeah.
So the department ultimately makes the decision, not ETA?
No.
No.
No. Theirs is just one piece of information that feeds into it.
So it's
The
almost, like
inspection
a,
report.
it's almost like a development proposal process. There's information gathered up, and ultimately the minister or a recommendation comes from the department.
It would be done at official level.
Right, it would be done at official level. Because I'm aware of one school in my constituency that sat for 6 months waiting on a reply from the department to take it out of formal intervention. Yet the board said they saw no reason why it couldn't be progressed. You see, for those 6 months, that school was in the very position that Trevor's referring to. People were saying, what's going on here? And it just so happened there was area planning going on. And it just so happened that there was a proposal to change significantly the nature of that school. That's what feeds, and I've seen the comment that was made in one of the respondents, that's what feeds this fear. And this is not what it's intended to be. And I would trust, David, you would take that on board as being a serious issue that people have as to the policy direction, and these things may be well intended. It seems as though when it comes to being practically implemented, it causes undue concern, which may or may not be necessary. Trevor, you wanted to make some final point?
Comment, Chairman. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that, you know, with 1,200 schools.
Yes.
And
yes.
How many of them are in there? About 13?
7 at the moment, satisfactory.
Seven out of men.
Even when you do look at first inspections, and we know over that time, I was looking at that, and the 559 inspections, 74% were good or better.
Yeah, well, that's I didn't know that figure, but that's the point I was trying to make, and that with all the pressures that we've been talking about on the boards, on schools, on principals, teachers, and pupils, for all that, the overall requirement to put schools into some form of assistance programme is actually very, very low. I mean, it's less than 1%. So, fair dues.
Okay, thank you. David, Karen, thank you very much for your time and for your papers. Thank you. Yes, what does members, does the committee want to indicate its view on the proposed changes for the FIP, or does it want to reserve its position pending the conclusion of the ETI inquiry? Will we wait till we see what the outcome of our inquiry is?
We've got two interim messages, haven't we, from this? One is the use of the word satisfactory, and the other is the linkage to area planning.
Yeah.
We've lost our decision-making quorums.
Yeah, well, we'll come back.
Robin's arrived too.
There we go.
Okay. So, leave it until we get more progress in relation to the inquiry.
And it's quite a short time anyway.
Yeah.
Well, you get answers
Okay.
on the reclassification.
Okay. Thank you. Members, moving on, the department has conveyed to us that they want to set before us an SL1 in relation to the Northern Ireland Teacher Pension Scheme, the cap and share reform proposals. So the information is at page 140 to 142 and is followed by a letter from the department summarises the responses to the consultation and a copy of the proposed statutory rule. Can I welcome Ian Gallagher, Head of Pay Remit and the Pensions Policy Team, who's been busy, I'm sure, in the last few weeks. Seamus Gallagher, Seamus, you're always welcome by to the committee, the Pay Remit and Pensions Policy Team, and Brian Quinn, also from the same team, you're very welcome. I think maybe Brian, maybe your first time, really, and Ian, you've been here before.
Have indeed,
yes,
Chairman,
that's right. And Seamus, we've been with us for a good while.
Yes.
Looking for his pension, maybe.
Not that old gentleman.
So, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming. And I'll ask you just to really bring us up to speed as to why this is a necessary process, and then members of the questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair and members, for the opportunity to brief the committee on draft legislation amending the NI Teachers Pension Scheme to allow for a 2012 valuation of the scheme, provide for the removal of cap and share provisions, and also enact a number of changes relating to workplace pension reform and other issues that we will detail in full in due course. We will also update you on proposals for increased NITPS contribution rates from April 2014 at the end of the session. During 2013, the Department issued 3 consultations. One was on removing the requirement to complete a 2008 valuation of the Teachers' Pension Scheme before proceeding with a 2012 valuation, and the removal of cap and share provisions. The other 2 consultations related to workplace reform and other amendments. One was on the policy and the other was on the draft regulations. The Department provided the committee with advance copies of each consultation document, and officials have explained the policy intentions of those proposed changes in previous sessions. Each consultation received 1 response, and the committee was provided with copies of the Department's summary of the outcome of those consultations. The Department intended to make 2 sets of amending legislation in line with the consultations, but as the timings of those consultations converged, the opportunity arose to bring them together into a single set of regulations, which made more sense from a housekeeping viewpoint. And the main provisions that are being enacted in the regulations are to, firstly, remove the requirement to complete a 2000 valuation of the Teachers' Pension Scheme before proceeding with the 2012 valuation, removing the cap and share provisions which are no longer necessary, providing for the automatic enrolment of teachers into the pension scheme in line with the workplace reform agenda. Now, the scheme already does have automatic enrolment for the vast majority of teachers, but these regulations will allow retired teachers to rejoin the scheme, allow teachers with more than one employment to make different decisions for each employment, ensure that those who have opted out of the scheme can revisit that decision every 3 years, and it also reduces the minimum age of scheme membership from 18 to 16. The regulations also reduce the minimum reduction in salary required to trigger phased retirement from 25% down to 20%. Finally, the regulations correct an oversight on the Department's part in April 2011 in applying the change of revaluation rate for uprating additional pension purchases from the Retail Prices Index to the Consumer Prices Index. Chair and members, quite a lot to take in there, and if any further clarifications required, or if members have any questions, we'll be happy to take them now, and Brian and Seamus can help answer those.
Just in terms of trying to get it summarised in terms of where the process is, what is the implications for this in relation to the passage of the pensions bill? Is this the next logical step, or this would have happened anyway? That's the first, just to be clear in our own minds, where the 2 processes sit.
Some of it would have happened anyway.
Okay.
And some of it is the stuff around the valuation is sort of going to enable the 2015 reforms, because we need to be in a position to have the most up-to-date valuation of the scheme. They set the initial employer contribution rate in 2015, which is why it doesn't make sense to waste further time carrying out a 2008 valuation, which is when we need the most up-to-date information. Cap and share has been removed in England and Wales, again because of Treasury's decision to move forward with pension reform, and they change
the whole funding arrangements around pension schemes going forward from 2015. So the regulation which the Northern Ireland regs was linked to, it's gone, so there's nothing left. It's obsolete, that regulation, so it's necessary to remove it. Do that part of it because of 2015 pension reform.
Okay.
The other workplace reform is separate.
You see the issue of removing the bar on retired teachers rejoining the scheme? And one of the reasons given was that it could be a disincentive to teachers who were re-employed, as they would obviously have to make a contribution more out of their salary. Does that mean that the current practice was a mistake? Because, has it encouraged retired teachers to seek re-employment?
Well, I think there are other provisions that we've brought in the meantime which have proved to be more effective. Over the course of the years, barring people from the scheme didn't appear to be a major disincentive to them coming back to work. The changes that have been made to put prematurely retired teachers onto point 1 of the scale when they come back to work and to charge the schools the full cost of the teaching have proved to be more of a disincentive. And now further, if those teachers are now paying a contribution out of that reduced salary, that would be viewed again as a further disincentive.
You make reference to an oversight in terms of 2011. Is there any financial implication to the department in regards to that? And is there a backlog of teachers, staff, for whom this has affected, and are they all been notified? Is there how's that being addressed in terms of the department has said to us there's an oversight 2011, so what's the implications of all of it?
There are 21 teachers affected by it.
Okay.
It was for purchase of additional pension since June of 2010.
Right.
I think 21 teachers have purchased something like £28,000 worth of additional pension in that time. The policy change was known in advance of that, and anybody who was doing their due diligence would have been aware that the change was coming, that those RPI to CPI was the new revaluation rate. Anybody who purchased additional pension before the date in 2010 that was announced by Treasury still will have the revaluation rate at retail prices index. I think we worked it out recently that the difference in the valuation with taken, I think last month there was 0.7% between RPI and CPI. The revaluation would be a difference of about £180 a year between the 21 of them. So there isn't a massive amount of money involved.
The Education Committee has its own pensions advisor, and I'm going to ask him now to ask the questions. It's Trevor. He's our expert on this.
You've asked the question about the relationship between this and the pensions bill. Do these proposed increases take account of the change of the pension age up to age 68?
We haven't started talking about the contribution increases yet, but we will re-examine contribution rates once we move to a new scheme in 2015. We expect that the average contribution rate would remain at the starting point the same as what we would set at now, 9.6%. But we may need to examine whether it's still appropriate to have tiered contribution rates going forward, because the benefit, the structure will be changed, and people with high salaries will not be as advantaged as they are under the current scheme. But that's a discussion which we haven't even had with teacher unions yet.
So whenever the pensions bill becomes law, you may have to revisit this again. Because I would have thought extending the pension age up to 68 would actually mean you might not need the same level of contributions.
We won't need to revisit the stuff that's in this SL1. we will have to bring forward a major new scheme, a new scheme for teachers, which will start in 2015. Now, we're currently drafting legislation on that. We've been discussing that with teacher unions for quite some time. We won't be able to start formal consultation on it until the bill gets royal assent. And we're more than happy, and we expect to be back here a number of times during the process of actually taking forward pension reform.
Yeah. So this actually could be short term and slightly academic. If it's going to have to be a further, a really root and branch review in 2015.
Well, part of the about the valuation is we need a 2012 valuation completed to inform 2015. Yeah. When we're writing the new scheme rules in terms of workplace reform, we'll build all that stuff into the new scheme as it starts off. But in the meantime, we still need to be able to bring these people in. They cover the period between now and 2015.
Next year.
Still.
Okay. I'm on a learning curve here as well, believe me. How do you value a scheme that's unfunded? I would have thought you would. I'm sure we could all get our head around how you would value a scheme that is funded, because the first thing you'd look at is the size of the fund.
We asked the Government Actuaries Department to do it, and they work it out based on a notional fund, and that's how much that increases by is set by Treasury through the discount rate, which is a notional amount.
Now you're losing me again.
But is it not a notional fund based on comparators? Is this not one part of the problem as well? Is that not the issue that we had raised the previous time?
There's no pot of money. It's funded from direct from government.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of setting contribution rates for members and employers, the actuaries carry out complex calculations, which I don't pretend to understand all of it.
Seamus, I'm glad you're the first official to come to the bottom of that table and actually say that. So, you know.
No shame on that.
No, there's not a bit.
I mean, just the whole thing seems a bit. I'm not criticising you guys at all, but it all seems a bit vague, Chairman. You know,
yeah.
We're changing contribution rates now, which are going to need to be actively looked at again next year. Yeah. I'm thinking, why bother? Well, it's on the basis of evaluation, which is so nebulous, and I mean, you can't disagree with actuaries, because how can you? Because they're the geniuses and we're not. But it really, it's so inconclusive and vague. I can understand the outrage amongst teachers, and I'm not saying this for the optics, but they don't understand why this is happening. And then you've got, of course, the input of the pensions bill as well. It's a bit of a mess, isn't it, really?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of issues, different issues going on here at the same time.
Yeah.
This particular SL1, which we're talking about first, isn't really about increasing the contributions or about pension reform. And it's fairly mundane and non-controversial. Yeah. The first one, the SL1 on the three consultations and the draft set of regs. Now, when we get on to contributions and pension reform, that's a different issue.
Yeah.
See, sorry about this, Chairman, but the actual increases proposed they're pretty minute. You know, some actuary somewhere has done such a detailed valuation of this fund and the requirements going forward that he's come up with a proposed increase, which I would guess would affect most of the profession, of 0.4%.
Well, the contribution increases, which we haven't come on to yet, hasn't been calculated by the actuary. It's been dictated, or it came out of the interim Hutton review when Treasury decided that it was going to make £2.8 billion worth of savings from public sector pension schemes by means of increase in contributions. They then passed that on to the Assembly with the proviso that if you don't make it, then we will reduce the block grant by a corresponding amount, which is why we're increasing member contributions.
The employer contribution has gone up.
the employer contributions have remained at 13.6%, and they will be dependent on the outcome of evaluation going forward.
I've asked you the question before. Do you think that the employer contribution and the teachers' pension scheme stands out as being relatively low compared to in other similar public or civil service schemes?
It's low in some, compared to some it's equivalent, fairly equivalent compared to health, but it all depends on the level of member contributions. The standard contribution across the schemes is fairly similar. We did do a comparison of all that at this stage last year. I think all the schemes are fairly comparable in terms of what the member puts in, what the member gets out.
I think the employer's contributions are, I know I'm veering off the subject a wee bit,
because we're coming on the contributions.
Yeah, but the employer's
now.
contribution in most of the schemes I looked at myself, generally beginning with a 2 rather than a 1, you know?
Health and teachers are the
poor relations.
Health and teachers, the employer's contributions are fairly similar. We don't know how it will turn out after the valuation. Civil service, the employer's contribution is higher because the member's contribution is lower, but the total contribution is in and around the same. And we've covered in the past why the member's contribution being lower because of historical differences in pay and just in the negotiations throughout a long, long time.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Well, maybe before we go on to Ian, in terms of the issue about the paper on the contributions, can we just deal with this piece of business now? Is the committee content for the proposed statutory rule for the Teacher Superannuation Amendment Regulation Northern Ireland 2014 to be made? Yes. Agreed? Yes. Because we make life easier for those men, I think, at the end of the table. Ian, do you want to comment on the paper in relation to the consultation on the proposed changes to the pensions contribution?
Yes, thank you, Chair and members again. This is the comment on the third yearly increase in contribution rates for members of the Teachers' Pension Scheme. As you know, the Executive decided on the 22nd of September 2011 to deliver savings to the cost of public sector schemes in Northern Ireland. And the aim was to do this fairly in a way which protected the lower paid and also minimised opt-outs from the scheme. So within that context, the Department consulted on proposed increases to contribution rates for Teacher Pension Scheme members for 2012 and 2013. And once all the views were considered, the Department decided to proceed with implementing the increased employee contribution rates for both 2012 and 2013. Those 2 yearly increases represent 80% of the required savings, and following that, the number or rate of opt-outs has not risen appreciably, and it actually remains a small proportion of scheme membership. The Department considers that the structure and distribution of contribution rates implemented in years 1 and 2 is achieving the Executive's aims, and as such, proposed in consultation to roll forward the salary bands from last year with increased rates to account for the final 20% of the savings from 2014. The Department consulted on the proposals for these increased contributions from the 25th of November 2013 to the 20th of January 2014, and we received 15 responses to the consultation. Most objected to the policy of increasing contributions, which was actually outside the scope of the consultation, and the responses did not put forward any alternative to either the rates or the bandings proposed in order to make the required savings. However, one new issue did arise during the consultation, and some respondents suggested that one of the pay bands from £45,000 to £75,000 is too wide. But following consideration last year, the Department took a decision to split the previous banding of £40,000 to £75,000 into 2 bands. So before you had 40 to 75, now we've had 40 to 45 and then 45 to £75,000. Around 80% of those in that original 40 to 75,000 band benefited because they fell within the lower part, i.e. between £40,000 and £45,000. The Department doesn't consider it appropriate to further subdivide the higher band because there's a relatively small proportion of teachers in there. That could create knock-on effects for rates in other bands, which would probably lower the rate of pay at which teachers would pay the maximum and would increase the administrative complexity for employers. After considering the outcome of the consultation, the Minister has decided to proceed with the contribution increase. The Department will publish its formal response in the very near future, and indeed we provided you with an advance copy yesterday. We intend to issue the SL1 for the contributions increase in the next few days and would ask the committee to note the time frame for implementing the necessary changes is once again extremely challenging. The Department is therefore seeking your cooperation in meeting that challenging timescale. Chair members, that's my bit maybe over for the moment. Thanks for your time in having us along here today. We're happy to deal with any questions you may have on the increased contributions now, or if you prefer, we can return once you have the SL1 or give you a written brief.
I think that, Ian, would be better if we wait till the SL1. Obviously, there was issue raised about the full-time equivalents, and I noticed that you've given us a breakdown of that. You did better in the responses on this one than you did the previous one. You got up to 15, and that's the thing that really does. You know, we get beaten around the world about the pensions bill from everybody, but here's been a consultation on an issue which directly affects people, and we get 15 responses, and they weren't all from individuals. Some of them were from, one might be a union response, and I appreciate that the union response should reflect members' views. That doesn't necessarily always be the case, because all the people would have different views. So we need to be cautious of and careful as how we take all that on board. But I think, Ian, unless Trevor, have you any comment on this, or question you want?
Just one question. Do you know offhand what proportion of the workforce actually fall within the 45 to 75 band?
Based on last year's figures, it was somewhere around about 7% of teachers.
Yeah, so it's not that.
It's a relatively small proportion.
Is the biggest band well, I'm not sure, but 26 to 40, yes. I suppose.
Yeah,
two bands.
Within those, there would be the majority of teachers. Yeah.
Is it possible, Ryan, maybe to give a breakdown of the bands in terms of the overall workforce, the percentage that falls into them?
That should be.
Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
To give us a view as to where the system sits.
Okay. Yeah, we can have that for next time around.
But even, sorry, Chairman, within that 45 to 75 band, and I think the more salary you earn, the less worried you are about your pension contribution. But 45 to 75 is quite a wide range, and if I was on 70,000 a year, which I'm not, I'd be less concerned that somebody's on 46,000. That's the point, really.
I used to not be so worried about the issue of pensions, although this year, when I have a significant birthday, it has now become an issue that I'm beginning to pay a bit more attention to.
When you get past pension age?
68. I was 68, yes. So I think we'll wait till we get the SL1. We do appreciate that you did provide us information yesterday, which is helpful, and you have been very helpful in terms of what you've provided us to date. So thank you. It is complex, it is difficult. But I think that we'll come back to maybe the issue that will cause more debate is around this issue, the contributions from the SL1 is brought to us. So we look forward to you coming back again. Okay. James, Ian, Ryan, thank you very much. Members, I think that is something we need to, we may need to do some work on it so that we know where we're at in regards to. Okay. Quickly, members, then correspondence, pages 172 to 314. We have 16 items that are provided, and there is also some untabled items as well. Can I just draw your attention to a few It's a correspondence from the Committee of Employment and Learning at page 174, advising the terms of reference of the inquiry into post-primary provision for individuals with learning disabilities. The inquiry deals with post-primary schools in SEM and is therefore not in our remit.
So it's post-school, all schools,
yes.
not just primary.
Not just primary. So we write to the committee asking them to keep us appraised of the evidence that they find. 182, we have correspondence from the Department in relation to Orangefield and the legal cover for enrolment changes in the absence of an approved development proposals. Now, it doesn't appear that the Department has addressed the committee's question because it's clear that the correspondence from Claire Mangan, the Chief Executive of the Belfast Board, is at odds with what the Department has said. Claire says clearly the Department approved the enrolment prior to her implementing it. DE appears to say it didn't. There is, I put this mildly, misinformation coming from somewhere. And I think the Department needs to be clear with us as to what is the situation. So I propose that we would write to the committee again asking them about the legal cover for the Department in the absence of the approved development proposals. Agreed?
Should we, Chair, at some stage be asking what lessons we've learned from the whole thing?
I don't think any, because you got the decisions that were made in relation to the area, but maybe we should ask what lessons have been learned from it. At page 196, you'll find a response from the committee's queries regarding the guidance to schools on the communication of sensitive issues, and you'll note that the North Eastern Education Library Board is undertaking an urgent investigation into the incident which has concerned the committee. So I would suggest that we write to the board to seek feedback on its urgent investigations and the actions it's taken as a result. I think that keeps it on the issue. Okay. Have enough for that. Page 262, 265, reference is made to the DE and the EU activities involved in the British Council. And in tabled items, we have a letter from the Department asking us to defer a briefing on EU funding. So I propose that we defer the briefing scheduled for next week, but that we require the Department to provide us with a detailed written briefing on the Peace 4 development process as soon as possible. And they were to give us information, remember, the meeting that we had in Coleraine. That was deferred. Is that a different one?
Not sure, but I remember them being at the end of the table.
They then subsequently came, is that right? Yes. So are members happy that we would also note the clerk, or would write to the Department and ask them for a detailed written briefing? Okay. You'll also wish to note that the clerk has met informally with the British Council on Monday and will come back to the committee with a proposal for a committee-sponsored event showing EU-funded activities that schools can get involved with. I think so. The provisional date is the 27th of May, and that's after the election. You'll be glad to know, just so that you're all reminded of that. You'll all be back down to earth.
Still be here.
So that'll be hopefully for members to be involved in. In tabled items, you'll find correspondence from the Newton Breda High School Concerned Parents Group inviting committee members to attend a public meeting on the 26th of February. And although individual members are, of course, at liberty to attend the meeting, it's not usual for the committee to adopt any position on an individual school proposal. So, but that's for noting. So maybe it would be just for clarity, so that there's no confusion. I would suggest that the clerk would write to the parents group along those terms, just so that we're all free to go as individuals and our parties and all of that. But it's not the policy of the committee to comment. Robin?
Just a question, Chair, in terms of will there be a response to the Reverend Green along those lines?
Yes. Yes, that's because it's courtesy just to explain the situation.
It was a fairly bland statement yesterday from the Minister in answer to Chris Little's question.
Yeah, well, I think there's going to be considerable discussion around that issue.
Good.
Tabled items, we have an invitation to the Generation Innovation event on Wednesday 12th of February at 5:30 in the Ulster Hall. Again, if members want to attend, then please advise the clerk. Any other issues that members want to raise in correspondence? Danny?
It was on the signature programme, still trying to chase up whether there's any chance of getting and to widen it to, there are still unfilled spaces at schools on the signature programmes. And the message I got from the schools, and despite trying to ask the right written questions, there doesn't seem, they're leaving it to the schools to try and fill them if the Western Education Library Board have failed to fill them. It's trying to push to will expand the years that people qualify so they can get more, or what are they going to do to help the schools get there?
Okay.
To WLB.
Yes.
What are they doing to help? Right.
Okay, help enough.
Have I been clear enough? Or,
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, members. Just finally, then, the forward work programme. The draft is at pages 316 to 320, and you'll note that it reflects some of the earlier discussion that we had regarding the strategic plan for the committee and the rest of the session. Can I remind members of our evening event with the Associate Assessors on Wednesday, the 19th of February, as part of the inquiry into the Education and Training Inspectorate. Also, the meeting with Mr Salzberg, who's coming from Finland. He has accepted our invitation to meet informally. It was suggested that we'd have a working dinner with him on Monday, the 24th of February, here at 6:30. This is expected to be late. Have we advance notice of what's on the order paper for that day?
We've some guesswork from the business office, but I think what's happened since then, Chair, is that Professor Solberg may have been double booked by Dell. As I was saying earlier in the informal session, that they've booked every minute of his time. So I'm going to have a chat with them because with Dell, because they promised that they would facilitate this previously. So we'll come back with that and confirm the date for now.
Right. Okay. Okay. The other issue that we want to confirm is that we had, there's the proposal that the committee would meet on the 26th of February and it would be held in the West Belfast Partnership Board. This meeting, the committee was due to receive a briefing from the Department on nurture units and from GTC-NI on its online survey regarding teacher perceptions of ETI. The West Belfast Partnership Board will also present informally to members on its education and training forum during lunch, and that was the reason why that members wanted to go and see that. So the clerk hopes to have the draft recommendations from the inquiry for our consideration on the 5th of March, and this would inform our final evidence session with the Chief Inspector on the 12th of March. Members happy enough? Okay, as discussed informally earlier, we have planned a session with STEM education and health issues and the reform of GCSEs and A-levels in March and April. Are members content with the draft forward work programme as agreed? Any other business? Okay, if no other business, the next meeting is scheduled to begin Wednesday 12th, 9:30 here in this room. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's on the 26th.